Of all the deadliest, nastiest, most monstrous creatures contained by the SCP Foundation, there is none quite like SCP-682. A mean green perpetual motion killing machine, this beast runs on spite and unnatural strength, fueled by hatred and an insatiable thirst for violence. With no known way of permanently destroying the thing, SCP-682 is likely to remain in Foundation custody until the sun burns out. Unless, of course, the research staff can finally crack the code on killing the thing once and for all. But one scientist at the SCP Foundation couldn't help but wonder, did violence really have to be the answer? Was the only way to manage SCP-682's hateful heart to stop it from beating? DrBright was having his weekly movie night, joined this time by SCP-507, who loved a good film whenever he was in a dimension that happened to have them. He had campaigned for a viewing of The Avengers, but DrBright insisted on something a little more heartfelt. He remembered a book that his mother used to read to him, and recalled that it had been adapted into a movie. So, in spite of SCP-507's sulking, he pressed play on Black Beauty, the story of a wild creature forming a bond with a determined young girl. The two learning and growing with each other and embarking on an unlikely friendship brought tears to his eyes. If she could tame that wild stallion, then why couldn't he, a man of infinite patience and even more infinite time, try and tame a wild beast of his own? That settled it. He was going to take a stand, to try something the Foundation had never dared attempt with SCP-682. He was going to become its friend. Are you out of your mind? Dr. Gears nearly dropped his mug of plain black coffee when DrBright told him his plan. That thing will tear you limb from limb before you can so much as say a word. Then I'll get another body. I'm willing to put in the work. DrBright shrugged, but as he looked at Dr. Gears' look of deep concern, he decided it would be better to ask for forgiveness than permission at this point. He had to misdirect, and fast. Haha, I got you. Look at your face. That was a prank. I'm kidding. I'd never try that. Anyway, lots to do. Bye! And he rushed off to undertake his grand vision by himself. When it worked, then he could make the rounds around the Foundation site with his I told you so's. DrBright hadn't grown up on a horse ranch. He hadn't even grown up with many pets. He had no idea where to begin when it came to animal taming, let alone the domestication of highly intelligent, misanthropic, anomalous animals. For an anomalous being, perhaps he needed to try an anomalous method of taming it. Suddenly, it occurred to him, SCP-010. That could work. The iron collars were stored at Site-19 in locked boxes. When worn, they would allow the wearer's every movement to be controlled via a handheld remote. It was perfect. He could get SCP-682 to give him a hug, a high five, to learn choreographed dance routines they could perform together. The possibilities were endless. But when he went to access the locked storage boxes, the guards posted outside the room asked what he was doing there. Testing, it's all official, he said. But the guards insisted they would have to be notified if any testing had been approved. He tried to argue with them, but as soon as he saw their expressions turn suspicious, he pivoted hard in a safer direction. Just kidding, pranked, got you good. Haha, yeah, you got us, Doc. One of the guards forced a chuckle. You, stay safe out there. Not if I see you first, DrBright responded, realizing only later that his response made no sense. Damn adrenaline. The thrill of the scheme was making him loopy. He needed to center himself, to refocus and figure out what his next step would be. If the collar had any chance of working on the massive reptile, the Foundation probably would have tried it before. And if he tried to sneak in and steal one of the damn things, someone might see him. Then his plan would be over before it even began. Besides, he reminded himself, he was trying to befriend SCP-682, not just pilot its movements, like some kind of giant remote control toy. If it listened to him, it needed to be because it wanted to, because they had formed a sacred bond between man and beast. No, SCP-010 wasn't the answer. He needed to get the opinion of an expert, hear advice from someone who really knew what they were doing. He hopped online and found exactly what he was looking for, an obedience seminar on training difficult animals. Okay, it was specifically a webinar about obedience training for dogs with behavioral problems, but what was SCP-682 if not a massive reptilian dog with a whole lot of behavioral problems? Besides, the webinar was only $50, so really, what could it hurt? DrBright kicked up his feet, poured himself a drink, and tuned into the video seminar. Once the credit card payment went through and the 5-hour session was through, he would know exactly what to do to take SCP-682 from Keter to Cutie. Well, maybe that was a bit much, but stranger things happened every day. After all, he was a guy whose soul was trapped in a necklace for all of eternity. With a beeping sound, the live video began, and DrBright prepared to absorb all the wisdom Dr. Monique, PhD in animal psychology, had to offer. He nodded off a few times, but for the most part, he was able to retain some very valuable tips. First, go slowly. Start working with your dog, or giant anomalous reptile, on familiar behaviors, or their favorite thing to do. Use positive reinforcement to encourage even the smallest of successes. This will teach the pet that training is a good thing. To ease the transition, only make one change at a time. Next, control the environment. During training sessions, take away potential distractions to help your pet stay focused. Put away toys they might be tempted to play with, or things they might try to eat. Minimize loud noises and other intrusions, such as passing squirrels. Avoid punishment, as it can increase anxiety and damage the relationship built on trust between pet and owner. In the long term, punishment can serve to increase aggression and other negative behaviors. Instead, use reward-based training tactics based around things the pet wants and likes, such as treats, petting, and playtime. When the pet does act out, redirect them to a different behavior, then reward that. When doing reward-based training, however, it is important to choose the right rewards. If the rewards aren't appealing or given frequently enough, they will stop evoking the desired response in the animal. Every animal is different, so figure out what yours loves and give them more of that. This particular tip might be hard to implement for SCP-682, DrBright thought, as he wrote it down. What do you give the anomaly that hates everything? Still, he would figure it out. The final tips of note were to make training a habit, part of the daily routine, made up of short training sessions throughout the day. If the training failed to produce desired results, a reasonable pet owner should be willing to bring in help from a trained expert. This is especially true if the animal is displaying excessive aggression. That one definitely applied to SCP-682, but there was no one more qualified to handle it than DrBright was, in his own opinion, at least. So with no one else to call, he would have to tackle the monumental undertaking himself. Dr. Monique concluded her seminar by asking each attendee about their respective pets. DrBright had to stretch the truth just a little bit, responding only a big one when asked about his dog's breed and describing its behavior problems as aggression and biting. Well, troubled animals often just need a little extra love and patience. And like I said, ask for help if you need it. Good luck, doctor, she said, giving him a wave before he signed out of the meeting. So, armed with a can-do attitude, an open heart, a spray bottle filled with hydrochloric acid, just in case, some toys, and as much sliced deli turkey as the local grocery store would sell him, DrBright prepared to sneak into SCP-682's containment cell. He timed it perfectly, waiting for the shift change so he could slip in unnoticed while the guards were swapping out. Using moves he learned from watching dozens of heist movies, he maneuvered around the security cameras, staying out of sight, and let himself into the high-security containment chamber. Dr. Monique said to remove all distractions while training a pet, and the acid bath that SCP-682 was submerged in was a pretty massive distraction. How was DrBright supposed to teach it anything if the creature's attention was on the constant corrosion of its flesh, muscle, and bone? Good thing he paid attention during SCP-682's official testing and knew how to drain the acid out of the room. As SCP-682's body began to rebuild itself, it turned to look at DrBright, eyes fixed on him. It spoke, in a voice dripping with pure disdain. "Why did you do that?"
Hey, buddy!
DrBright ignored the question, speaking in a soft, higher-pitched voice that Dr. Monique recommended for soothing troubled dogs.
Want a treat?
He held out a pack of sliced turkey. Not waiting for an answer, he tossed the food toward the reptile, and it landed just in front of the creature's mouth with a soft thud. After a moment of careful study, of making sure this was not some sort of trick, SCP-682 opened its mouth and swallowed the turkey in one gulp. "More," it said, opening its mouth wide, exposing its rows and rows of sharp teeth.
Wait a second, you can have more, but first, sit.
DrBright held up his hand to teach the command. "Sit?" the creature repeated, incredulous.
Sit.
DrBright repeated patiently. SCP-682 responded with a swipe of its tail that knocked DrBright into the wall, breaking several of his ribs. "Bad, 682!
bad!
DrBright reflexively reached for the spray bottle, squirting some acid onto the creature's scales. It recoiled, and DrBright became aware of what he was doing. He was using punishment when he should have been using positive reinforcement. He dropped the spray bottle, kicking it off to the side.
I'm so sorry, buddy. That wasn't nice. I shouldn't have.
SCP-682 wouldn't even look at him.
Here, you want this? Catch?
He held up a large ball, tossing it towards the creature. It bounced off the beast's nose uselessly. Disgusting, 682 growled.
You're right. That was disgusting. I forgot everything I learned. I let my ego get in the way. Listen, I promise I'll never do it again.
He tossed more turkey towards the creature, and as it ate, he gently patted its broad, scaly side.
I know you don't like my colleagues here. I get it. Why would you? They're always hurting you, trying to control you. I know what that's like. We've got a lot in common, you know? We've both been through so much pain. We both can't die, even if we wanted to. If you let me, I could be a friend to you.
SCP-682 was silent for a moment as it stared into DrBright's eyes, considering his words. Then, it spoke. You are... DrBright held his breath, waiting to hear what came next. Disgusting! SCP-682 roared. The last thing DrBright saw was the monster's jaws clamping down around his head, and then everything went black. DrBright woke up in his offices with that stiff, new body feeling he had become accustomed to. There was a note waiting for him on his desk, on the O5 Council's letterhead. It read, DrBright, I hope you understand the gravity of what you did today. Your careless actions caused a containment breach of SCP-682 that resulted in over a dozen casualties. Be thankful you were given a new body at all, as it was briefly debated whether or not you deserved one. But you are too valuable to the Foundation to keep locked in a box. Remember that. Do not interfere with SCP-682 again, or there will be dire consequences. Additionally, as your viewing of Black Beauty has been attributed to this incident, all future film viewings must be subject to formal approval until you can prove that this is no longer necessary. Now sit in your office and think about what you've done. O5-1. DrBright slumped over his desk, feeling sorry for himself. Suddenly, he heard a familiar cooing sound coming from the doorway. He turned and saw the tickle monster here to visit him and cheer him up. It oozed over to his desk, wanting for him to pet it. As he patted its slimy surface, he smiled to himself. No matter how many mistakes he made, how much of a screw-up he might feel like sometimes, at least he knew SCP-999 would always be happy to see him. Forget horses, dogs, and especially SCP-682. Man's best friend was right here. Now go and check out SCP-963 What Would You Do If You Were Immortal Like Dr. Jack Bright? And could Dr. Jack Bright escape Silent Hill? For more Jack Bright adventures, if you could even call it that.